Greetings, dear ones. I am Kryon of Magnetic Service. I have said that so often. But that's not all that I am. I'm a brother and a sister. I am part of you and you are part of me and you don't even know it. When you get out of the box called 4 dimensions, those times when I see you when you're not here, you know all about it. Some of you have looked upon my words and seen far more than words. You felt the hugs of a brother or a sister. You felt the timelessness of who you are. And if you felt that, it's because this has always been the projection. We're all sacred equally, pieces and parts of what you would call God. We speak between the veil and here, easier and easier. We bring you concepts which, although are not new, continue to be startling to someone in this box called 4 dimensions. It's a sweet place here. And I know all of you. I know the youngsters who are just starting out in life who know so much more than youngsters did a decade ago. I know the seniors who have come, who feel invigorated by being so close to Spirit for so long. And if you take those youngsters and you put them next to the seniors, they have something in common. They have the consciousness of God. Timeless they are. They just happen to have different biology at the moment. And they can meet with one another and share with one another like they had always known each other. And some do. An acknowledgement that at some level, age is not important, makes no difference. Even life experience at some level makes no difference. It's at another level than you are. I know who you are. And it's not because I've heard meditations or anyone who's prayed to me. It's because Spirit is on your shoulder. Did you know that? You are part of a quantum collective. An all-knowing, all-loving energy, which knows exactly what you're going through and the fears, the challenges, the questions. Next time you meditate, try this. Sit on the floor and don't say a word. Don't think about the things that you're trying to do or the things that you want to accomplish, because your brother, your sister, that includes me, knows it all. We live every moment that you do. Your life experience on earth is far more important than you think. The setups that you're experiencing right now, the challenges, the decisions you're going to have to make, even what you're going to do when you walk out of here, are the most important thing in the universe to us. You're the forerunners, you're the lighthouses, you're the ones who have taken the day to see whether this makes any sense. We have those in here who it's obvious will make a difference for the planet, and you celebrate them on their way. And then there are the ones that feel so ordinary, and I say to you, you are making the difference for the planet just as much as Yah-Yi. And I'll explain that in a moment. Yes, indeed. The message will be about biology. It'll be scientific, yes. Information will be given here that will be transcribed. And I guarantee will make it into a place that will validate some of the things that you're going to see in the next 3 years in science. I'll give it to you here early. But it's more than that. For when we start talking about human DNA, we're starting to talk about a life force that you have yet to understand. Oh, you study it like it's such a static thing. And I'll get to that too. But before we begin, let's just take a moment. It's a spiritual time. Whatever that means to you, inward, you might go. Whatever that means to you, touching your higher self is something you might do, so that you'd have a grander understanding of even the science that is being presented today. And if you are here as the scientist, this is for you. Presented in love. Piecemeal. We give you information which is about to be discovered on the planet anyway. But we love to do it. And then we can say, well, you heard it here first. DNA. When my partner started this work, they didn't talk much about it. And now that's just about all we talk about. What has happened between then and now in your linear time frame is astonishing. Not just in your own science, but even in the esoteric. We now are labeling the DNA layers. We're giving them the names in Hebrew. There would be those who say, well, why are they in Hebrew? Why are they not in Lemurian or perhaps in Sumerian? All right, you find me a dictionary of Sumerian and Lemurian, and we might do that. But there isn't. So the core language of the planet that is most understood, the most profound, that has the seeds of creation, is Hebrew. And so this is where we go and where we turn for understanding. And you'll see science doing it too. For they understand how profound it is. We're starting to identify the layers of DNA for you and trying to give you an interdimensional picture of how they wind together. It's impossible. For to you, 12 is always 12. There's 1, then there's 2, then there's 3, then there's 4, and they're all in a row. Well, they're not. They exist on top of one another, and they touch one another in ways that are complex. We told you that layers 4 and 5 only go together. They can only be together. And there would be those who would say, well, why is that they can only be together? And the answer is yes. We've told you about 2 kinds of layers of DNA that sound similar. They're both dealing with the Akashic record, but one is personal and one is universal. And they touch each other constantly, and then they touch layer 1, which is the biological layer, constantly. They always are touching. And yet you want to put them in a box. I'm going to tell you about one tonight, and you're going to want to put it in a box. Say, well, now Kryon talked about that one. That's very interesting. That one does this. As though the other ones didn't. They're all together. Again, we say it's like soup. You're about to taste it. The ingredients are there, but they don't label themselves for you. They're just there, and they work together to create nutrition, taste, pleasure. And it's like that with DNA. And before we launch into this discussion, we have to remind you, it's like that with DNA. Whatever we tell you, remember, it's a fraction of the story. And so we'll start by concentrating on the chemical. And my partner's had a rehearsal for this, and I hope it gets it better this time. DNA. Most of you are not scientists. Imagine it for a moment. twisted pair of nucleotides hanging on a superstructure of sugar. There's a lot of it when you start looking at it. There's only 4 parts. They're repeated so often, it's staggering. 3 billion base pairs. And it's supposed to make up the entire human genome. And that's something you recently have mapped, and you should be proud. You finally got the map. But what I'm going to present to you tonight is this, is you're in a box and you're biased. Even in the beginning study of this DNA, you're biased. You think you know how it works and you don't. And so you're only looking for what you expect to work. 3 billion base pairs. Well, the map is done. And the map is like getting a book in a foreign language. And finally, now you've been able to photograph every page and you know every letter. And you do. Every single letter. And now it's time to interpret the language and make sense of what the map says in the human genome. And here's where the bias comes in, because right away, here's what your science is saying. Well, we happen to notice there's a whole lot of this stuff, but there's only 3% that seems to be doing anything at all. And that 3%, now we can tell that it's doing something because these are protein-coded DNA parts. They create genes. It's not going to be that hard because we have discovered that only 3% of DNA does anything at all, and those genes, now there's only about 40,000 of them, and we can begin to find out what makes the body work and throw away everything else. In fact, we're going to call it junk. 97% of what science has labeled in DNA, they're going to throw away as junk. Now, there's a couple of things that may be wrong with this. And let's just study 1 or 2 of them. But first, let's say why they do this. They say, obviously, it's left over from development. It is no longer needed. It is no longer used. It's junk. Somehow the human used to use it, but they don't now. And here's how they prove their case. They say because the onion has 36 billion pairs. It's got a lot of junk. Now that doesn't relate at all. It doesn't relate to intelligence or complexity of structure. The onion, 36, 12 times as much DNA as you do. And they say, of course, you know, the onion is not intelligent, the onion is not complex. Really, onions don't make war. They may be far more complex than you think. What if they had imprinted instructions about nutrition that went deeper and were more complex at an interdimensional level than even what you are going through? Did you ever think of that? Maybe there's a purpose for them that is hiding. Did you ever think of that? It's not junk. Let me tell you something. How many of you have even begun to study the process that is beautiful called evolution? Indeed, it has shaped the planet. Indeed, you can see it operate even in your own lifetime in certain species. Indeed, those scientists who have studied biology tell you that the fish that no longer need eyes drop the eyes. The creatures who no longer need legs develop flippers. It doesn't always take that long either. You see, evolution is very, very efficient. It doesn't create waste. It's in survival mode. And so I ask you, how does that fit the model of 97% junk? Do you really believe that your biology evolved so preciously and beautifully with help from the seeds of the 7 sisters into a place where you stand and 97% of it is junk? doesn't work that way. So what's it about, Kryon? The first metaphor of the day, I will give you this. You've identified all of the letters, but you make presuppositions, and this one is the worst. You've decided from the depths of your wisdom and all that you know is that the only letters that are important are E. Now, this is a metaphor. And so therefore, the only words you're going to pay attention to in 3 billion base pairs are the words that have an E in them. Because everybody knows that all the words that don't have an E are junk. So what is your limitation? Your limitation is that you've only got one letter. That's all your awareness provides. And in this metaphor, that letter happens to be your idea of genes. What are genes? And in your science, they say the only genes are the ones that are chemically produced by protein-encoded DNA. If you don't see the protein codes, you're not going to get genes. If there are no protein codes, it's junk. And here's what we're going to tell you, dear human being. That 97%, that's where the gold is. That's the RNA. The 97% is the smart part. There are over 120,000 genes in the human genome. And we say that now, and someday you'll see we're right, because if you only count the E's, there's only 40,000. You see, the protein-encoded portions of DNA are the mortar and the brick. That is the building that will be built in the body. The genealogy that you study that is only protein encoded, therefore, is only the bricks of the building. The intelligence of the design and the part that talks to all 12 layers is 97% strong. It's the RNA. It's the intelligent instruction sets for the protein encoded sets. It's not been seen. It's not been studied. It's not even been acknowledged. And off you go. And you're going to figure out the human genome and throw away 97% of it. Well, you won't. Because there are enough who will take a look. Why does it look like junk? Because there are no encodings that make sense. You expect words to have a certain shape. And even in mathematics and even in computer programming, if you look at a code, it has to have start and stop marks. It has to have indicators, the go-tos. It's the same in biology, except in this 97th percentile. There is no coding that makes any sense. It's interdimensional. It's written in an interdimensional language that will not make sense to anyone until they start using base 12 math. And then it'll flip into a pattern, a grid. You'll start to see the repeating parts, and there's a lot of them. You'll start to coordinate the RNA and instructions to the genealogy that is protein encoded. It's not that far away, and that's why we bring it to you now. 12 layers deep. Kryon, what's the secret to the communication? You say they're instruction sets, but how do they communicate? If you're telling us the way it is, how do they communicate to layers you can't see that are interdimensional? And now I will introduce you to layer 9. And we've been waiting to this point. A DNA discussion to talk about layer 9. Oh, it's beautiful. We've waited a long time to give you the 9. You know, 9 is completion. It completes the story about layer 1. We told you this would be confusing, just a little bit interdimensional. The 9th layer of DNA is called Shekinah Ish. Shekinah Ish. We will translate that in our way as the flame of expansion. Layer 9. The flame of expansion. Now let me tell you what it is and what it does. An interdimensional layer, esoteric information that can never be proven. But some of you will know this rings with truth. You see, layer 9 is what's missing in layer 1. Layer 9 is what makes the junk work. And when you put layer 9 and layer 1 together, you get a completion of communication to the interdimensional layers. Those instruction sets, 97% deep, are instruction sets for all DNA, not just layer 1. Layer 9 is the bridge, the flame of expansion. It's the bridge to ascension. It's the bridge to healing. It's the bridge to mastery. It's the bridge to self-worth. It's what you are trying to reach as what you call the cosmic lattice, for that is the energy of layer 9. And there's more. Expansion. If somebody said, well, my DNA is expanding, you'd say, well, get to the hospital. And what is your bias there? You'd say, because it's not supposed to. You don't want something like that. You want it to stay the same now, don't you? Layer 9 even has its own patron saint. Saint Germain. The flame is the violet flame. Healing. Power. Change. Activation. It's the only layer of DNA that's connected with a spiritual being. The flame of expansion. Shekinah. It's important that you understand, as esoteric as this is, it is true. And if science says that you can have 11 dimensions, and we say there are at least 12, there's actually more than 27, but who's counting? And you could understand that it is indeed possible that what I am telling you is not only true, but you should look at it closely. How does this become practical information, Kryon? I'll tell you that as you visualize these things that I give you in any way you wish to, non-scientist, it helps you to understand truly what is going on within you. You don't have to understand the chemistry to truly see these married. Layer 9 and layer 1 create a 10 in numerology. A 10 is reduced to a 1, and 1 is new beginning. When you start taking the numerology of DNA and putting it together, you get still another layer of information about what it does with the other layers. Even applying basic numerology to what we have given you, the layers 4 and 5 must always work together because they are a 9. And that 9 works with the 9 I just gave you, which works with the 1 that I just told you about. Complex? Not really. But there is hiding messages about what it does and how it works, even within basic numerological terms. Oh, I'm not finished. I want to take you to a place where there is DNA. And I want to make you this about the size of a nucleotide. I want you to take a look at this vastness. Come into this closet with me where we're going to look at DNA and envision for a moment you're there and seeing it in all of its wonder and its glory, its complexity. going to give you 2 hints about DNA here that we've never talked about except one other time. There's more to DNA than you think. I want you to come into this closet with me and turn out the light. No light whatsoever. As dark as it can be. Dark of dark. The DNA is still in there with you, and there you sit watching it. You can't see a thing. Now I want you to enhance your eyesight. I want you to make it 10,000 times more sensitive than it is. And now you're going to see it. Now I'm just giving you some numbers that will indeed apply to the sensitivity of the instruments that are going to be needed to see what I'm going to reveal. DNA creates light. You're going to see it. The room is going to lighten up and the DNA glowing. DNA creates photons. DNA has its own energy source. DNA is active. It's not only that. I want you to increase your hearing to the megahertz range and the sensitivity way beyond what you have here, even that of a dog. I want you to hear everything possible to hear and be aware that not only is the DNA creating its own light, it's singing. In the megahertz range, DNA creates sound, or at least what you would call vibration, all by itself. One strand all by itself, which contains all 12 interdimensional strands, creates light and sings songs. And you might say, well, that's very lovely, Kryon. What do we make of this? I'm telling you that in the laboratory, you're going to see it if you want to. Create light and sing. It's not understood, it's not known, it's never been noted. There is no notation. DNA vibrates and creates literal sonic energy. Now I'm going to leave that alone for a moment and take you someplace you don't expect. I want you to go to a laboratory with me in Utah some years ago. 2 research scientists, they're good physicists and chemists. They're excited. They're very, very excited. Pons and Fleischmann. They're looking at cold fusion right in front of them. The chemistry that needs to have a remainder of a reaction that will show itself to indicate cold fusion is showing itself. We call it a remainder. It's a creation of the process. That's how you know cold fusion is occurring, and it's occurring, and they're seeing it, and they're excited. They've kept this quiet. They have not involved their research teams because they see themselves as the new Watson and Crick 21st century. They will be the ones to bring cold fusion to the earth, and they're seeing it, they've done it, and they get excited. And the only thing that is unfortunate is that they're the only people that ever saw it. They announced it in their zeal, perhaps not very scientific, for they did not repeat it over and over. They saw it so clearly, they said anybody can do this. The problem was nobody could do this. And they were ridiculed. And they lost their tenures. They lost their reputations. They thought it was a hoax. Today, you don't even know where they are, do you? And here's the information I want to bring to you. They saw it because it was real. In the room, what they did not understand was they had placed themselves into a consciousness scientific box of thought. They thought they knew how it worked, and they saw it work, therefore they were correct. They were in the basement. And in that basement, there were other things going on they did not know about. Now, I'm going to tell you something that you're going to see in the news. The potentials are, at this moment, that you'll see it within 2 years. Perhaps even faster. 2 things were going on in the room. One was a mild magnetic field created by a transformer on the other side of the wall. which has been removed. But the other thing, the more profound thing, there was an oscillation in the megahertz range being created by a piece of equipment that had nothing to do with their experiment in the basement. Electronic. Call it residual oscillation if you wish. That was singing a song. And they saw cold fusion because, dear ones, cold fusion is not possible without ultrasonics. When you add the ultrasonics to the chemistry that you expect, watch what happens. Here's a hint for those who are scientific-minded of you. You've got to have 2 ultrasonic generators for this to work. It was an anomaly in that basement to have these oscillating frequencies beating against each other, almost in unison, but not quite, to give remainders of the null, which added to the chemistry and spoke to it in a way that created the results of cold fusion. Some of you will know what I'm talking about now, and some of you will know it later when it comes out in your news. Watch for it. Ultrasonic cold fusion. We're going to name an effect today. This is now going to start to make sense. In the experiments of Dr. Todd Ovakaitis, who we now call Yai, he discovered something. He hasn't named it yet, so we will. That when you speak in a certain fashion to the cells of the body, especially the DNA, when the attributes are correct and the energy is delivered, you get a greater healing than the sum of the parts of the cure that you presented to it. It's almost like this. Let me give you an example. Let us say that it's your job to keep a baseball moving in a playing field. And so alone, you throw it from one end of the field to the other. And you spend your life throwing the ball, walking to the other end of the field and throwing it back, walking to the other end of the field and throwing it back, because the ball must stay in motion as often as possible. Let us say for a moment, that is the metaphor of health. Suddenly, along comes a process that is interdimensional. And part of it is even a consciousness shift. The playing field itself has begun to shift. And now something amazing is happening. Instead of having to throw that ball into the field and walk to the other side and throw it and walk and throw, you make one throw and something invisible catches it and throws it to something else invisible and throws it to something else invisible. And there you stand, watching the ball whiz around, creating life force and health way beyond anything you thought was possible. It's a metaphor. You throw one ball into the field and what you get is a miracle. It continues going and going and going because there's an energy in the field that was never there before. Oh, perhaps it was, but it never showed itself until you threw the ball just a little differently. This is the core information of Yai. What he is indeed working on that was present in the temple of rejuvenation are messages to cellular structure, to DNA, to the 97% RNA instructions that kick them into action. He's throwing the ball to that. And he is literally awakening the instruction sets that have been dormant and waiting to see this kind of process where you get more healing than the sum of the parts of the cure. or of the process of the healing. It's almost like you give somebody a fish and a loaf. And suddenly there are many fishes and many loaves. You get the picture? So we'll name it. It's an effect in biology that has only been seen here in his work. And it's called the Yai effect. Oh, it won't stay that way for long. Science will indeed give it some kind of name that no one can pronounce but scientists. It's so typical. But you can always call it the Yai effect. Now let me tell you some more about the Yai effect. There's more here than just healing. There's more here than just an effect of biology and chemistry because of what I'm going to present in this next and last section. I've got to do still another metaphor about DNA. I hope you understand. I hope you get this. And we'll make it simple. Humanity has discovered a beautiful piano. This is the metaphor. The piano is called DNA. The piano is not only a beautiful instrument that is complex with many notes that play together that intertwine in their harmonies. A craftsman has made it. It's sonically perfect. And it plays a tune over and over. That tune is called human health. The structure of the piano is called the layers of DNA. And then there's a musician who is playing the tune. And the musician is called life force or consciousness. And that's the human being. And this is indeed what humanity has discovered. And just lately in their science, they said we've covered every inch of the piano. We know what makes it work. We know the sonics of it. We can pluck the strings of it. We know what they're called. We know the names of the notes. We know how many there are. We've identified the tune. We know how it plays. Now this is a metaphor of having mapped the human genome. And the tune that plays, well, that's the genealogy and the protein encoded parts of the DNA. We see the life force and the consciousness. We don't understand it, but we know it's necessary for the tune to be played, and that's called the essence of life. Dead DNA plays no tune. You need the player. Now hold that vision. You've got the piano, you've got the tune, you've got the player. And you've decided to put that in a box, dear human being. And here's what you've decided. This beautiful piano can only play one tune. Pretty ridiculous. Because that's the tune that you think is responsible for human health. And the player, oh, it's always the same player. Has to be, because that's the essence of life. Let me tell you something. The repertoire of your DNA is unlimited. You can play tune after tune after tune after tune. And let me tell you about the player. The player has a real long piano bench. And the invitation is to add players. Why don't you add the higher self? He does a real good job on the complex parts. Now you've got two sitting at the bench. Why not add a guide or two? Or even maybe a patron saint with a violet flame. Listen to that music, will you? But oh no, you'll say, well, this is what DNA does. Doesn't do anything else. 97% of it is waiting to take off. You own the most advanced jet plane on the earth. And no one has ever seen it do anything but taxi up and down the runway. It's time to start understanding what that 97% is. It responds not just to chemistry, not just to Yai's inventions. It responds to human consciousness. It responds to you. It responds to prayer. It responds to light. Human DNA is prepared for mastery. Every child born on the earth has the seeds of mastery. That's what's going on. Does it shock you that science sees it as junk? That will change. And that's the truth. And with this we close. Kryon, what do we do right now? Before any of the discoveries are made, to take advantage of what you're telling us. I know you. Don't you remember the last time you passed over and came back? You don't. It saddens my heart that you can't. That's part of being a human being. You know me. You don't remember. Trillions of entities come through the veil in support of humanity. We sit with you. We hold your hand. You're our brother and our sister. You're forever just like us. You don't see us. You don't feel us. Some of you would doubt such a thing could ever even be. We don't exist. We're out of your reality, but from our side, you are family. There's no greater love than this. We'll say it again, the God that put the universe together, big enough to see multiverses coming and going, and yet small enough to live in your heart. The last time you came and went from earth, we held a party. A grand one. You could hardly wait to get back. But you don't think that way. We hear you saying in your quietest moments, you know, if I have to go through this, I'm never coming back. Yes, you are. That's what you do. You're lovers of Gaia. You are lovers of the universe. Humanity is that way. And not all planets are. But this one is. And here you sit. Some of you wondering, when will this be over? I got things to do. There is no judgment in any of this, except someday you will know that what I speak is accurate and is true. What can you do? Why don't you take the hand of the higher self right now? Don't join anything. Don't read anything. Just sit and know that you are God. Prepare yourself for expansion. Let it be something that is yours for the rest of your life. It isn't something that gets better or gets worse. It just is. Once the expansion begins, it's tough to turn it around. Step by step, see your magnificence. Let the anomalies be healed that you came with, that you're worried about. We know who you are. That the things that you are indeed knowing in your bodies are inappropriate for you now, remove themselves because of your thinking and your DNA, because you are in charge of it. Let this healing be accurate and true and permanent right now. Because there's masters in this room. And so it is.